Viktor Stahl suffered a psychotic break after catastrophic market losses and murdered 7 people inside the Zurich headquarters of Stahl Meridian Capital. That was the official story. It was on every screen by morning. Financial anchors reposted it with grave voices. Police spokesmen stood beneath weak winter light. Experts who had never met Viktor Stahl talked about pressure, ego, isolation, and impossible wealth. By noon, they had a phrase for it: billionaire breakdown. By the next morning, they had a moral: no man can own that much of the world without eventually being eaten by it. That's the only problem that Viktor Stahl had. Not suffered catastrophic market losses. Not that week. Not that month. Not even that year. Stahl Meridian Capital had made more money in 72 hours before his death than most nations make in a quarter. Their positions were perfect. Their timing was impossible. Their largest short paid out so precisely that regulators opened inquiries before their bodies were even cold. So when every broadcast used the same phrase, catastrophic market losses, I noticed. I was a reporter, and that was all. I wrote about money, the way it moved, the way it hid, the way it bought silence and then called the silence privacy. And Viktor Stahl's death smelled like money. The official story said 7 members of his executive team had been killed. That was the second lie. Only 3 were executives. One was a risk analyst. One was his private physician. One was a chef. And one was a chauffeur. The dead had been promoted after death so the headline would read better: billionaire murders executives. That made sense to people. A billionaire murders his doctor, his chef, and the man who drives him home. Well, that asked some different questions. For 4 days, I thought I was chasing corporate murder, a boardroom coup, a staged suicide. Then I get a call. The man would not give his name, but he spoke with a Swiss-French accent and breathed like someone calling from the bottom of a well. "You're looking at the wrong numbers," he said. "What numbers should I be looking at?" "The medical ones." And then he hung up. Viktor Stahl's medical records were gone. Not sealed. Gone. His Zurich neurologist retired 2 days after the incident. His private physician was one of the dead. His appointments vanished from every clinic system my sources could reach. The only thing I found was an old insurance note attached to an executive medical evacuation policy. It listed a diagnosis: chronic neurovascular pain disorder, progressive, non-responsive to treatment. I sent it to a neurologist that I trusted. She called me back within 10 minutes. "Whoever this is," she said, "was in hell." Viktor Stahl had migraines. Not headaches. Not stress. His migraines so severe his nervous system had begun rewriting his life around them. Light triggered them. Pressure triggered them. Sound, food, sleep, the weather. Every treatment had failed, and then his plane disappeared. For 3 months before his death, Viktor Stahl's Gulfstream left Zurich bound for Nice. It never landed there. Not exactly. The flight crossed the Mediterranean coast. Then its transponder vanished for 38 minutes. When it returned, it was approaching Nice from a different direction that made no sense unless it had gone somewhere else first. Flight trackers blamed equipment errors. The airport filed nothing unusual. His office said he'd been resting. 9 days later, Viktor returned to Zurich. His migraines had stopped completely. He no longer wore tinted glasses indoors. He slept less than 2 hours a night. Cooked food disgusted him and his security had doubled. His wife quietly moved out of the lake house. His voice remained on calls. His signature remained on documents. And the trades improved. Whatever happened to Viktor Stahl, it had not made him weaker. It had made him better. The decision came faster, cleaner, unemotional in a way even financial men found unsettling. One trader told me Viktor had started referring to employees as temperature. I asked what that meant. Then he stopped answering my calls. A week later, a legal letter arrived from a firm I had never heard of. It warned me that false claims against Viktor Stahl's medical history would expose me to catastrophic liability. Catastrophic. That word again. My editor told me to drop it. You have smoke, she said, but no fire. She was right. Then the fire came to my door. It was a Tuesday night. Cold London rain on the windows. I got home just after 11 and found a package outside my flat. No postage, no courier label, no return address. Inside was a VHS cassette. Black plastic, no sticker, no handwriting. Just one symbol embossed over the front. The Omega symbol. End. Last. Hell, I didn't even own a VCR. Nobody owns a VCR until the worst night of your life requires one. I found one the next morning, and then I went home and closed the blinds, put my phone in the microwave. Paranoia is only embarrassing when you're wrong. The tape began with static, white snow, a low mechanical hiss, and then a timestamp appeared. Stahl Meridian Capital, camera 29-4, 02:31 a.m. The footage was black and white. No sound. Executive corridor. Polished stone floor. Glass walls. Low light. The elevator opened. Viktor Stahl had stepped out. I'd seen him in a photograph at summits, in court, on yachts, always with the same narrow face and the pale blue eyes. But on the tape he looked different. Thinner, sharper, not sick, more refined, like someone had removed everything unnecessary and left only decision. A receptionist sat behind a crescent desk sorting papers. She looked up and smiled. Viktor smiled back. For several seconds nothing happened. Then she caught her finger on a staple. There was a bead of blood at the tip. Viktor stopped. Not suddenly. Slowly. As if some part of him had heard it. The receptionist laughed. On the silent footage I could see her mouth form the words, It's nothing. Victor did not move, his eyes fixed on her hand. His expression changed in a way I still cannot describe cleanly. It was not hunger. Not yet. It was recognition. Like he had heard someone call his name, and then he stepped back. The receptionist's smile faded. Victor lifted one hand, palm outward, an apology or a warning. His mouth moved. I replayed it 5 times. He said, "I'm sorry." Then he turned and walked away fast. Not running, but trying not to. The tape cut. The next timestamp showed the executive washroom. Victor stood over a marble sink, staring at himself in the mirror. The water was running. His fingers tightened. The marble cracked under his hands. Not shattered, but cracked. He looked down at what he had done, then back at his reflection, and his mouth moved. No sound, just lips. Don't. He punched the mirror until his hand went through. Blood spilled across the sink. He did not react to pain. He was not angry. He was testing something. Then the broken mirror showed his face in pieces. 20 Victors. 30. He leaned close to them. His mouth opened again. This time I could read it clearly. "What did you do to me?" The tape cut again. Camera 29-18, main boardroom, 024155. 7 people were inside. 3 executives. 2 women, a chef standing near a sideboard, the risk analyst near the window. They were arguing anxiously. Then Victor entered. Everyone stopped. He had wrapped his hand in a towel. Blood had soaked all the way through. One of the women approached him, older than the others, confident. Someone used to telling powerful men difficult things. Her mouth moved. "Victor, we need to call your doctor." He looked at her, then past her, then at each person in the room. He tilted his head, listening. The room became still. He said something, but the camera had no audio. I zoomed until the image broke into blocks. "Can you all hear that?" Nobody answered. He smiled, not with amusement, but with horror. "Your hearts." One of the men laughed. You could see the laugh leave him wrong. Too quick. Too high. The risk analysis backed away first. Smartest person in the room. Victor closed his eyes and pressed both of his hands over his ears. He shook his head. Once. Twice. Harder. The woman reached for him. He flinched away so violently she stumbled. Then he opened his mouth. The tape had no sound, but every person in that boardroom recoiled like something had struck them. The footage glitched. Not static, but distortion. The image tore sideways as though tape itself did not want to remember what had happened next. When it returned, 17 seconds had passed. The boardroom was different. The woman who had reached for Victor was on the table, not lying there, but like somebody had placed her. Her throat opened in a single perfect line. One executive was against the glass wall, sliding down slowly, leaving a dark smear behind him. The chef was gone, and the risk analyst was crawling under the conference table, and Viktor stood in the center of the room, both hands raised. His towel was gone, and his mouth was red. He looked at the woman on the table, then his hands, and then he began to cry. No sound, no sobbing, just his face breaking open with the full understanding of what he had done. He went to the woman and tried to press the wound close. He tried to help her. That made it worse. Because when the blood touched his hands, he stopped crying. His whole body changed. Not dramatically, just stillness. His shoulders lowered, his breathing slowed, his head tilted again. The risk analyst under the table covered her mouth with both hands. Viktor looked directly toward her hiding place, not because he saw her, because he heard her. Then the tape cut. I pulled away from the screen for a while. I told myself that was all fake. Not because it looked fake, but because it had to be. Then I pressed play. The next fragment came from the private medical suite. I had not known there was a medical suite inside Stahl Meridian. But of course there was. Men like Viktor Stahl did not wait in emergency rooms. His private physician was inside, packing something into a metal case. The door opened before he finished. Viktor entered. The doctor backed away, speaking quickly, too quickly to read. Viktor pointed at his own chest, then his head, then at the doctor. Fix it. The doctor shook his head. Viktor stepped closer. The doctor held both hands up and said something. Viktor stopped. The doctor said it again. I watched that scene too many times, but the sentence itself burned into me. Not complication. That's what the doctor said. Not complication. Viktor stared at him. The doctor kept talking. Viktor shook his head. The doctor backed into the medication cabinet. Viktor said one word. Liar. The doctor reached for the metal case. Viktor moved. The camera blurred. The doctor struck the wall. The metal case opened across the floor, and inside of it were 3 black syringes and foam slots. 2 empty, 1 full. The label was visible for less than a second. Omega variant 7. Viktor saw it. So did I. He picked up the full syringe. His hand was shaking, not from weakness, but from restraint. The doctor tried to crawl away. For a moment, the man that Viktor used to be returned. The billionaire who believed money could solve any problem. Then that man disappeared. Viktor placed the syringe into his jacket pocket. He went to the doctor, and the tape cut before the worst of it. That was mercy. Or editing. I still don't know which. The final fragment came from a police body camera. Polizzi, Unit 3. 030714. The video shook with every step. Stairwell. Heavy breathing. Radio chatter. Multiple casualties. Unknown suspect. Fire alarm active. The officer reached the 29th floor with 2 others behind him. The hallway lights flickered. Smoke drifted along the ceiling. The sprinklers had not activated. Officers passed the reception desk. The receptionist was alive. She sat beneath it, one hand clamped over her bleeding finger. Her eyes were wide and empty. She pointed toward the boardroom. The main corridor was painted in blood. Marked. The officer stepped into the boardroom. I wish he had not. Viktor Stahl was kneeling in the center of the room, bodies around him. Not all dead. That was the worst part. Some moved. Some breathed. Softly. Carefully. As if pain knew not to make too much noise. Viktor's back faced the camera. His jacket was gone. His white shirt was red-black and torn at the shoulders. His hands rested on his knees. He was completely still. The officer said, "Herr Stahl?" Viktor didn't move. The officer stepped closer. Viktor spoke. The body camera caught it clearly. "Please leave." His voice was almost normal. Hoarse, but normal. The officer ordered him to raise his hands. Viktor obeyed, slowly. Hands open, blood dripping from his fingers. The officer stepped closer again. Viktor turned his head slightly. "Do not come any closer." The officer came closer. Because that's what officers do when they believe the world still has rules. Viktor turned. His eyes reflected the flashlight. Not red, not glowing, but black. Wrong black. Like the pupils had opened up too far and found no bottom. His mouth trembled. He looked ashamed. "I'm trying," Viktor said. The officer froze. "I'm trying not to hurt anyone else." Nobody spoke. Then someone behind the officer slipped on the blood. A boot sliding. A breath catching. Small sounds. Viktor's eyes snapped toward them. Gunfire exploded white across the frame. Once. Twice. 3 times. Viktor fell backward. For 1 second I thought they had killed him. Then he sat up. Not like a wounded man. Like somebody interrupted. The tape broke into static. When the picture returned, the body camera was on the floor, sideways. The officer lay beside it, staring into the lens, alive, blinking, but unable to move. Behind him, the corridor burned. Through the smoke, Viktor walked past slowly. Barefoot now. No panic. No rage. He carried the metal case from the medical suite, and at the far end of the hall, 2 men in dark clothing appeared. Not police. Not fire. Not Stahl security. They wore no insignia. Viktor stopped. For the first time on the tape, he looked afraid. The men did not approach him. They simply watched. One of them raised his hand. A gesture. Calm down. Viktor's shoulders dropped. The fight left him. Not defeated, but recognized. One man had placed a black coat around his shoulders. The other took the metal case. Then all 3 disappeared into the smoke. The officer on the floor whispered something. "Was his dad's? What is that?" Then the fire bloomed white across the frame. The tape ended. I didn't move for a long time. The screen went blue. The VCR clicked. Rain slid down the window like something dragging its fingers over glass. By morning, the horror had changed shape. At first, I saw a massacre. Then I saw a sick man losing control. Then I saw a procedure. Not by Viktor. Around him. The cameras had cut at the right moments. The worst angles were missing. The evidence I needed was included. The evidence that would have been undeniable was not. Whoever sent the tape had not given me the truth. They had given me a trail. Omega. The symbol on the cassette. The label on the syringe. The men in the smoke. That was the road. I followed it through the money. Stahl Meridian Capital had paid 18 million euros to a shell company in Luxembourg. That company paid a medical logistics firm in Monaco. The money had led to a locked funicular station on the Côte d'Azur, hidden behind an abandoned chapel. No clinic appeared on my map. One leaked invoice gave me the word member, not patient. They were members. Annual membership renewal, 7 million euros. Non-refundable. Subject to review. The story became too large for one article. Too strange. My editor stopped looking angry and started looking afraid. "This is not publishable," she said. "You haven't watched the tape." "I don't want to watch the tape." The magazine killed the piece. Officially, legal risk. Unofficially, survival. I went home that night. My flat had been searched. Not ransacked. Searched. Professionally. The VHS tape was gone, and in its place was a black vellum card. "Mr. Pierce, Dr. Vale appreciates your diligence." At the bottom was the symbol, Omega. No threat. No demand. No warning. Just recognition. And that frightened me more than any warning could have. 8 months later, I received another package. Not at my flat, but at my mother's house. She was 74, recovering from pneumonia. Inside the box was black velvet. Inside the velvet was one card, not addressed to her, addressed to me. "Mr. Pierce, we understand your recent diagnosis. Dr. Vale would be pleased to discuss your future." I had not told anyone. Not my editor. Not my mother. Not the woman I had been seeing. 3 weeks earlier, a doctor in London had showed me a scan and used a very careful voice doctors use when language has to walk around death. Pancreatic, advanced, aggressive, months, not years. I told no one, but Omega knew. Of course they knew. They knew Viktor was sick before he did. They knew where he would go when the pain made his empire meaningless. They knew what he would pay. And when he became it too quickly, too publicly, too hungrily, they revised protocol. They didn't fail. They cleaned the floor. They buried the evidence. They wrote a better story. They waited. The black card is beside me now. I keep thinking about Viktor Stahl in that washroom, staring at the broken pieces of himself. What did you do to me? And I keep thinking about the one thing no report had ever mentioned. Before the fire filled the hall, before Victor disappeared into the smoke with the men who had came to collect him. He looked directly into the fallen camera. Not the officer, not the fire, at the lens, at me. His mouth moved. I missed it the first dozen times. Then I slowed the tape down, frame by frame. He said 2 words. Not help me, not run, not sorry. He said, you're next. The official report said Viktor Stahl died in the fire. There is no grave. No body was ever released. No death certificate was ever found. His fortune moved through trusts whose beneficiaries cannot be named. And every year on the anniversary of the incident, 7 million euros leaves one of those trusts and disappears into a Luxembourg company with no employees. Membership renewal. Non-refundable. Subject to review. So no, Viktor Stahl did not go mad. He did not lose everything. He did not die in that tower. He was corrected. He was collected. And somewhere above the Mediterranean, behind white stone glass walls with no mirrors and doors that only opened for people wealthy enough to be afraid of death, the Omega Clinic reviewed the footage. They studied the bodies. They adjusted the formulas. They retired Variant 7. And in every internal document I have recovered, that night was never called a massacre. It was never called a tragedy. It was never called a failure. Only an incident. The Stahl incident. My flight leaves for Nice tomorrow morning. I have not decided whether I'm going to expose them or ask them to save me. But I know this. If I come back cured, do not believe anything I say. Sleep tight. Or don't. From dusk till dawn.